When I was a child, I was abused by someone close that I should have been able to trust. That really kind of messed with my head and my relationships. I worked at a hotel in Cleveland in the kitchen, and I'd gone to high school and junior high with the guy who was the manager of the kitchen. And he said, "Hey, do you want to come over and play some Madden or Tiger, or, golf or something like that?" And I knew his wife pretty well, so I was like, sure. So I went over to their house and ended up drinking and smoking weed. And that was the first time I ever did drugs. And I remember from that time on, I realized that drugs could numb all the problems in my life. It became a vicious cycle of doing cocaine to stay up all day so I could work, and then doing heroin to sleep late at night. And I would continue doing it over and over and over again. Nobody knew. I did all the right things, said all the right things, went to church, raised my hands. Nobody ever knew. I had bad relationships with girls for years. Obviously drugs fuel that. But I would use women because I was still being controlled by sex and by that driving desire to finally have control of control of a woman, because it was a woman who had abused me. I was leaving a party very high and drunk, hit a telephone pole head on in my GMC Sonoma, going about 65 miles an hour without wearing a seatbelt. My family was in essence getting ready for me to die because the doctors just looked at them and said, "We don't know what's wrong with him. We can't wake him up." During that time, I actually had a vision of judgment, which was God just reading off a list of everything I'd ever done and saying, "Okay, you're going to hell." And during that, Christ actually stepped forward, and as I'm sitting on my knees sobbing, realizing that I'm just not worthy of life, he stepped forward and picked me up and said, "You're right, you're not. You finally get what grace is. Grace is not what we earn. Grace is not doing the right thing. Grace is what we don't deserve." Oddly enough, one of my best friends, Colby, was standing behind him because he had died about a year and a half before this. And I ran over to Colby because he was such a good Christian, such a good kid. And when I went to give him a hug, he put up his hand and stopped me. And he just looked at me and shook his head and he said, "I am so ashamed to be standing here saying I know you." And those were the moments that immediately snapped me back to, I've got to change something. I had an East Ridge police officer show up at the accident scene who came to my hospital room after I woke up out of the coma and tell me it was good to see me doing okay. He said, "Listen," he said, "here's the deal." He said, "I could have gotten your blood test results. I could have gotten this and taken you to jail and had you arrested for driving under the influence." He said, "But if you don't change, you will be dead in the next year." About 2 or 3 days later, in the hospital, was handed a book by a guy named Brian Welch, a former guitarist for Korn named Head. And it talked about his redemption from drugs and alcohol. And through that, and then my relationship with a man named John Gann, who really mentored me and helped me, I have been clean from heroin and cocaine for 7 years. I'd blocked out the abuse. I've forgiven the person that it came from, but for probably a good 2 years after my wreck, it remained as a tool for Satan to control me and to actually use that after I had gotten back on the right path with God to keep me just off track enough that I wasn't doing the things I should have been doing. And once I was able to actually acknowledge that it had happened and look back at the impact that it had had on my life, I was able to take it and deal with it and say, you know what, this happened. This is why I've done this my entire life, and if I continue to let it control me, it's not gonna lead to anything but destruction. A lot of deliverance has to do with saying, you know what, I'm not gonna go there. I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna go hang out with the same crowd. I'm not gonna go do the same things. It is an act of God, and it is God saying, you know what, you're free. But it's actually walking in that freedom.
How great the love of Jesus Christ. Upon the cross of Calvary, the blood was shed that pardons me. No longer bound, no